I'm MC Townsend, affectionately known as Madam Chair. I'm the current chair for BizFed. Been with the organization since its inception. Extraordinarily proud of the organization to the extent from then to now how it has grown. Don Sinclair, before he leaves the room, which he just bounced out real quickly there, passed the baton on to me. And likely we will continue to pass these batons, but as you can tell from here, that BizFed is very, very engaged in a lot of things. I also serve as president and CEO of the Regional Black Chamber of Commerce here in the San Fernando Valley. We just serviced our 15th year, very, very proud of that, a little over 500 plus small minority and women-owned businesses, really providing additional access and visibility to great sessions like this throughout the state. And last, I just completed my term as 4 years with the California Black Chamber Council of Chambers, some 35 other chambers around the state that again collectively come together and do these amazing things to help out our small minority and women-owned businesses. So when you hear the word business, Tracy and our ears sort of pop up like everything overall, but I certainly want to express our deepest appreciation to all of you this morning who are engaging in this conversation. And based on the conversation thus far, I would suspect that we're going to leave here with a lot of intel associated with the cap and trade programs today. So let's continue this dialogue with the exploration of, and I think a young man had asked early on, where's all that money going and how we're going to get it and who decides what and when. So let me introduce our next speaker on that topic, Colleen Callahan. She's the Deputy Director of the UCLA Lufkin Center for Innovation, which conducts research in collaboration with civic partners to inform the design and implementation of policy plans and programs advancing sustainability. In this role, she directs and communicates results from research projects on climate actions, clean transportation, and so much more. She is known as a top expert in the field on greenhouse gas reduction fund. She also directs and teaches in UCLA's Leaders in Sustainability Certificate program, which is offered to all the PhDs and master's degree students on the campus of UCLA. In her free time, amazingly, as reading her full bio here, she actually has a little free time, and what does she do with it? She has co-founded and served as a board member for the Los Angeles Sustainability Collaborative. She has over a decade of experience with environmental health policy and planning, including previously as manager of air quality policy for the American Lung Association of California. She's a environmental fellow, recipient of the Neville Parker Award from the U.S. Council of University Transportation Centers. She's a co-recipient of 2 national awards from the American Planning Association. She holds an MA in the urban planning from the UCLA and a BA in urban and environmental policy from the Occidental College. Ladies, let's continue, ladies and gents, let's keep this conversation going. Let me introduce to the podium Ms. Colleen Callahan.
Good morning. Thank you so much for the nice introduction, and thank you, BizFed, for the opportunity to be here today.
In my presentation this morning, I will summarize the process for how cap and trade revenues can get to the LA region, why the LA region could benefit and by receiving a significantly large percentage of the share of the dollars, and how we could benefit through the various grant programs. I'll end by summarizing key opportunities and challenges relevant to BizFed members. Next slide, please. So as Dennis helpfully described, we have this cap and trade auction system. I'm not going to provide details because Dennis did such a great job of doing that. So I'll just get into kind of the heart of my presentation, which is focus on where these auction revenues go. The main place they go is to the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, or the GGRF, which I'll call it for short. The GGRF is the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund. As we know, this is a large and growing source of funding. I'll talk about and kind of break down the budget numbers and the programs receiving funds in a moment. But first, quickly, the process. So through the state's annual budget process, the legislature and governor appropriate dollars from the GGRF to state agencies. And these state agencies have their programs that get funded. And these programs fall into three main categories: sustainable communities and clean transportation, energy efficiency and clean energy, and natural resources and waste diversion. Next slide, please. This shows just a little bit more detailed way of looking at the GGRF funding process. The California Air Resources Board, or ARB, is the main agency coordinating the implementation of the fund. In collaboration with other agencies, they have produced two foundational documents. First is a 3-year investment plan. This plan lists what is eligible for funding from the cap and trade auction revenues in the GGRF. It's not a guarantee of funding, but it provides a general roadmap. The vast majority of programs included in this current, in the first investment plan, are existing programs, which are important. I'll come back to that point. Existing programs implemented by an array of agencies. The actual budget appropriations are determined, as I mentioned, by the governor and the legislature through the annual budget process decided by the end of June each year. So we're getting really close to some actual final decisions this year. And then, after the annual budget appropriations are decided, the money starts flowing to the state agencies. The state agencies then make funding decisions. And these funding decisions are derived from their program level guidelines. Their program level guidelines have been informed by the overall GGRF guidelines that ARB put forth last year. Their interim guidelines, they're being updated now. That informs then, like I said, this program level guidelines that tells us what's applicable to, or what's eligible for funding from each program. And that then informs the project applications. And the main kind of entity that can submit these project applications for the programs that are currently being funded are municipalities. But many programs allow or encourage businesses and nonprofits to partner with local governments on projects. Next slide, please. The programs involve a competitive funding process in which no applicant, no municipality, no project details are guaranteed a certain amount of funding. But state law requires consideration be given to projects in and benefiting disadvantaged communities, of which the LA region has the largest concentration. Next slide. This law is SB 535, which was authored by now Senate Speaker Kevin De Leon. SB 535 establishes a framework to direct investments to disadvantaged communities. It requires that at least 25% of the monies in the fund go to projects that provide benefit to disadvantaged communities, and that at least 10% of the funds are actually located in disadvantaged communities. I'll just quickly mention another law, AB 1532, that mandates that monies in the GGRF be used not only to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, but also to maximize economic, environmental, and public health benefits. This means that investments should produce jobs and support California businesses. Next slide. The state developed a scientific tool, it's called CalEnviroScreen, to identify these communities, these disadvantaged communities. The tool generates at a census tract level environmental health risk rankings based on population burden and other environmental indicators, as well as in the other kind of main category, population characteristics, and socioeconomic indicators. The red and dark orange areas on this map are the disadvantaged communities that have been identified for the purposes of implementing the GGRF. It's important to note that of the state's 58 counties, LA County alone is home to about half of all of the disadvantaged communities in the state. So in other words, the tool underscores that LA County faces disproportionately high levels of environmental health threats. But next slide. Given SB 535 requirements, it's logical to assume that then LA County could disproportionately benefit from the dollars. But there's certainly no guarantee of this. And I'll talk more about that a little bit towards the end of my presentation. First, I'll just quickly provide an overview of the amount of money we're talking about and for what specific programs. So next slide. This slide shows the rapid increase in funding from cap and trade, which Dennis referred to. The state recently held the fourth and final quarterly auction of the 2014-2015 year. And so this graph actually should be updated. That last bar should indicate that the levels of funding are even higher than this. But clearly the trend is very upward. Next slide. So what does this translate into in terms of the actual dollars? So we know that the budget, a little less than $8 billion for this current fiscal year that ends in a few weeks, 832 to be exact. This is really the first year in which programs and projects are being invested in from the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund. As mentioned before, the programs fall into three main categories. Programs in the sustainable communities and clean transportation category, that's the largest category. They include high-speed rail, affordable housing near transit, transit operations, and capital programs. Funding is also going to energy efficiency and renewable energy projects, in addition to various urban forestry and other natural resource and waste diversion programs. Next slide. I'll come back to this, one more slide over and we'll come back. Okay, so per legislation passed a year ago, 60% of the funding is automatically allocated to programs in the sustainable communities and clean transportation investment category. And then the remaining 40% is split up and decided each year amongst programs in the energy and natural resource categories. And then if you could go back to the slide you were on a moment ago, I'm sorry. Thank you. So this same kind of budget breakdown, the 60%, 40%, 60% allocated, 40% kind of that will be split up based on annual appropriations. This will apply to the next fiscal year and following years. But this next fiscal year that begins very soon, the picture is more complicated, in part because we have a lot more funds. Now it's, as Dennis was saying, over $2.2 billion. And as you can see, the budget has gotten complicated. So we won't get into all the details. We can come back to it during Q&A. But the high-level summary of this budget is that the governor is essentially proposing to double the amount that he originally proposed, going to the GGRF in the 2014-2016 year. A few new programs have also been added, mostly to respond to the drought. And again, a big total increase from less than $1 billion to over $2 billion now in the fiscal year that will start next month. And this number could be precedent-setting. This program will go to 2020, and there's talk of it going beyond that as well. So I'm happy to come back to these programs. There's obviously a lot of different programs, a lot of complexity here. So I can come back to it during the Q&A. But first, let me end by summarizing what I see as some key opportunities and challenges for the LA region. So 2 slides forward, please. Thank you. All right. We know this is a major new funding opportunity. Again, over $2.2 billion is proposed for this upcoming fiscal year. But the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund is an unprecedented and complex process for the state to implement and also for local entities to participate in. And we're early in the process. Kinks are still being worked out. As you can see from the budget slides, clearly there's a lot of investment areas, all with some local economic potential for the LA region, could be said. But many programs, with many programs, going after the funds is a fragmented and siloed process because each program, and there are well over a dozen now, have their own competitive grant process. In general, only government entities are eligible to apply through these programs, not all, but for many. Although there's certainly opportunities for businesses to partner with local governments on project applications and implementing projects that get funded. Also, as I noted, LA County has more disadvantaged communities than any other county, any other region of the state. And per SB 535, projects benefiting disadvantaged communities receive a set-aside of sorts. But again, it's a competitive funding process, so there's no guarantee that any entity in LA County or LA County as a whole will receive any certain funding amount. Through the GGRF guidelines, criteria for what counts as investments benefiting disadvantaged communities are rather broadly defined. And this could actually hurt places like LA County that have a high concentration of these communities. The state, as I mentioned, are updating their GGRF funding guidelines this summer, and there could be an opportunity to tighten the criteria. Also happening right now, bills are proposed that would establish a technical assistance program for small businesses, nonprofits, and disadvantaged communities in general, seeking the GGRF dollars. Technical assistance could be important for the LA County area because of how complicated many of these grant applications are. And as what happened with ARA funding, better resourced municipalities in the Bay Area, for example, with good grant writing teams, tended to fare a lot better than LA County did, and Southern California in general. So I'm going to just give one program level example to illustrate these broader opportunities and challenges points. I know that a lot of you are interested in affordable housing. You tackled this complex issue in the fall. So I'm going to talk about, next slide please, the Affordable Housing Sustainable Communities Program. This program is posed to receive $40 million in the upcoming fiscal year, the largest budget amount for the GGRF after high-speed rail. Given the nature of the capital-intensive projects to be funded through this program and the lack of recent state investment in affordable housing that we're aware of, there will still be pent-up unmet demand from the program. It's not going to fix everything, as we probably know. Of the 40, I'm also going to just give a little bit of detail about kind of where we are with the process for this program right now. So first round of applications submitted, the Strategic Growth Council that coordinates this program, they have selected 54 programs statewide in which they're asking them to submit full proposals. Only 13 of those 54 are located in the 5-county Southern California region, the SCAG region. We have someone here today from SCAG, so they can probably talk a little bit more about this. Of the 13, 11 are in LA County. This means that most counties in the Southern California region had no project applications moved to the next round, even though half of the state's population is based in Southern California. So this point is underscored in a comment letter being circulated by Climate Resolve and Move LA. So I'm happy to connect you, after today's program if you want with those folks. But I'm just giving some examples of potential opportunities and challenges with this program. As I mentioned, the decision maker in the case of this program, Affordable Housing Sustainable Communities Program, is the Strategic Growth Council. They work in coordination with other agencies. The program is new. Unlike most of the programs receiving funds, this program is actually new, and it involves a lot of agencies with multiple goals, and so things get complicated. Also, there's a fairly quick implementation timeline. And so what happened this year is, in essence, only shovel-ready projects could be eligible to apply. But this means that these projects were conceived before guidelines were set for the GGRF and the specific program. So both the program guidelines and the projects and project applications could probably be improved over time to help ensure that Southern California gets its fair share. And with that program example, I will open it up to questions.